And I wanted to tease out a little bit more about your framing of the intra-war deterrence problem. I really liked this, where you said we're facing two different and conflicting objectives: deterring the next adversary attack while also compelling a cessation of hostilities to win. And one thing from the Project Adam study that the authors debated quite a bit is, how are we defining winning here? And on an earlier panel today, somebody said, let's be clear, there is no winning here. Nobody wins. The U.S. has signed up to that language. Nuclear war cannot be won, must never be fought, et cetera. And so how do you think about winning? I want to put air quotes around it, because I do think that's right. If we're in a scenario where nuclear weapons have been used in theater against allies, that it's really hard to reconcile that with an idea of winning. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's certainly a complex because we go down a lot of different avenues to talk about what is the condition of the United States in a post-nuclear exchange environment, and that is a place that's a place we'd like to avoid, right? And so when we talk about non-nuclear and nuclear capabilities, we certainly don't want to have an exchange, right? I think everybody would agree, if we have to have an exchange, then we want to do it in terms that are most acceptable to the United States. So it's terms that are most acceptable to the United States that puts us in a position to continue to lead the world, right? So we're largely viewed as the world leader. And do we lead the world in an area where we've considered loss? The answer is no, right? And so it would be to a point where we would maintain sufficient. We'd have to have sufficient capability. We'd have to have reserve capacity. You wouldn't expend all of your resources to gain winning, right? Because then you have nothing to deter from at that point. So
this has got to stop. We don't want anything to happen like this. We want it to be over. This is not about who wins and who loses. Everyone loses in a nuclear exchange. We need to prevail upon these people in Kiev to stop. This government needs to stop. We need to get rid of any admirals or generals who are prepared to make reckless public statements. We've had this for too long. A lot of people today don't remember it. When Colin Powell was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, we had this General McPeak from the Air Force who made some reckless comments about reducing Iraq to ashes or a parking lot or something. The Air Force could win the war all on its own, didn't need anybody else. And he was removed just for saying that. And he was replaced by somebody named Fogelman. This is far more serious, Judge. This man is making pronouncements that the Russians think are policy pronouncements. Men in uniform do not make policy. That has to be made very clear. This is out of control.
This person is U.S. Strategic Command spokesman, Rear Admiral Thomas Buchanan. There he is. Now, I'd never heard of this fellow. I don't know if you have. He's a Rear Admiral, so he's not 4 stars. I was mistaken on that. Colonel, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the most serious, how serious has this become in the past 3 days?
10.
Oh.
This Rear Admiral, who's probably a 2-star, and they have Rear Admiral upper half, lower half in the Navy. I suspect he's a 1 or a 2. Not only should he be instantly removed from his position, whoever his boss is, whoever the 4-star in charge is, he should be removed. You've got to make an example of this. These people do not make policy. That spokesman would never have said a thing like that unless he was comfortable doing so.
Right.
The only way he could be comfortable is if he heard his boss make these statements.
Russia urges U.S. to exercise restraint after Pentagon's statement on exchange of nuclear strikes. Kremlin spokesman reiterates commitment to prevent nuclear conflict, calls on West to adopt similarly responsible stance. Elena Teslova 21.11.2024. Russia urges U.S. to exercise restraint after Pentagon's statement on exchange of nuclear strikes. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. Moscow. Russia on Thursday urged the U.S. to exercise restraint in response to the Pentagon's statement regarding the possibility of nuclear strike exchanges. Speaking at a Moscow press briefing, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov emphasized Russia's commitment to prevent a nuclear conflict and called on the West to adopt a similarly responsible stance. Russia's nuclear doctrine underscores our responsible approach to making every effort to avoid such a conflict. We expect other nations to act responsibly and refrain from provocative actions, he said. The comments followed a statement by Rear ADM Thomas Buchanan of the U.S. Strategic Command, who said Washington remains prepared for a nuclear exchange under acceptable terms, though it does not seek such a scenario. Addressing concerns about potential threats to Belarus, Peskov noted ongoing collaboration between Russian and Belarusian intelligence services. Belarus faces an unfriendly environment with potential threats. Our intelligence agencies are in constant contact, and this topic is regularly addressed at the presidential level, he said. He added that the security of Belarus, as a Union state member, is covered under Russia's nuclear doctrine, which prioritizes deterring aggression against both Russia and its allies using the full extent of its military power, including nuclear capabilities. The Union state is a two-state alliance between Russia and Belarus, which covers all areas of cooperation. President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday approved changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine, which says an attack from a non-nuclear state, if backed by a nuclear power, will be treated as a joint attack on Russia. End of article.
In the Special Military Operations Zone, I'm talking about what happened in the wake of long-range Western weapons being used in the Special Military Operations Zone. As a result of the escalation, the United States and their NATO allies said that they give their permission to use long-range weapons against targets inside Russia. Experts know fully well, and the Russian side has underscored this time and again, that using such weapons without the direct involvement of military operators from manufacturing countries is impossible. On November the 19th, 6 ATACMS missiles manufactured in the US were used, and on the 21st, a combined attack using Storm Shadow manufactured in the UK and missiles manufactured in the US were used to attack missile targets in the Bryansk and Kursk regions of the Russian Federation. Starting from that point, as we have underscored many times, the regional conflict in Ukraine, provoked by the West, acquired a global character. Our anti-missile systems countered those attacks. As a result, the targets and objectives set by the enemy were not achieved. The fire and the ammunition storage in the Bryansk region, as a result of fragments of ATACMS missiles falling, has been contained. No victims. In the Kursk region, one of the command and control centers of our Sever group was attacked. As a result of the attack and the countermeasures, there have been people wounded and killed, and those who were involved in servicing these facilities those who were members of the command have not been hit by the attack and are now continuing their operation to remove the enemy from the Kursk region. I repeat, the use of such weapons cannot change the course of the special military operation. Our military is successfully advancing along the entire line of contact, and all the objectives that we set before ourselves will be met. As a response to the use of US and UK manufactured weapons, the Russian forces have carried out a combined strike on one of the military-industrial facilities in Ukraine. And this included the test of a novel intermediate-range Russian missile system. A ballistic missile with a non-nuclear hypersonic payload was used. The test was carried out successfully. The objectives of the launch have been met. One of the largest and well-known industrial centers that is known since the Soviet times in the Dnieper region, which is known and to be involved in enemy production, was hit. And further plans are being made in Europe and the Asia-Pacific to deploy weapons and missiles. And we believe it is a mistake on the part of the United States to destroy the system that was established by the Missile Treaty in 2019. We see that the United States and their allies are now considering and have successfully tested their capabilities to deploy advanced missile systems in different parts of the world. And their exercises routinely include the use of such weapons. Russia has unilaterally refused to deploy intermediate and small-range missiles until we see similar weapons deployed by the United States in a region of the world. The use of the novel system, which was essentially an operational test, was carried out in response to the decisions made by the United States and their allies. And the further actions will be considered and decided based on what we see from them. The further course of action will be determined based on the threats to the security of the Russian Federation. We believe that we have the right to use our weapons against military facilities of countries who allow their weapons to be used against ours. And in case of an escalation, we will act as decisively in a mirror fashion. The ruling elites of the countries are nurturing plans to use their military contingents against Russia should be warned. When choosing measures to be used in response, such as the use of systems that was tested recently in Ukraine, will certainly include warnings to civilians to clear the zones that will be targeted, and we will certainly do this in a transparent fashion. And we do not have any fears that it will reduce the effectiveness of those systems, because there is no way to counteract a missile that flies at 10 Mach, which is 2.5 to 3 kilometers per second. Existing anti-missile systems and the anti-missile systems deployed by the United States and Europe cannot intercept such missiles. It is impossible. So, once again, it is not Russia, but the United States who have destroyed the system of international security. And they are trying to preserve their hegemony and stoking a global conflict. We have always preferred, and we still prefer, to resolve our disagreements and using peaceful means, but we are prepared for any scenario. And if anyone has any doubts, they shouldn't. There will always be a response. Around the world, as well as those who still nurture illusions that a strategic defeat can be inflicted against Russia, about events that are happening in the Special Military Operations Zone. I'm talking about what happened in the wake of long-range Western weapons being used in the Special Military Operations Zone. As a result of the escalation, the United States and their NATO allies said that they give their permission to use long-range weapons against targets inside Russia. Experts know fully well, and the Russian side has underscored this time and again, that using such weapons without the direct involvement of military operators from manufacturing countries is impossible. On November the 19th, 6 ATACMS missiles manufactured in the US were used, and on the 21st, a combined attack using Storm Shadow manufactured in the UK and missiles manufactured in the US were used to attack missile targets in the Bryansk and Kursk regions of the Russian Federation. Starting from that point, as we have underscored many times, the regional conflict in Ukraine, provoked by the West, acquired a global character. Our anti-missile systems countered those attacks. As a result, the targets and objectives set by the enemy were not achieved. The fire and the ammunition storage in the Bryansk region, as a result of fragments of ATACMS missiles falling, has been contained. No victims. In the Kursk region, one of the command and control centers of our Sever group was attacked. As a result of the attack and the countermeasures, there have been people wounded and killed, and those who were involved in servicing these facilities, those who were members of the command have not been hit by the attack and are now continuing their operation to remove the enemy from the Kursk region.
Let's talk about the missile strike into Dnipropetrovsk, the statement from Russian President Vladimir Putin, and what comes next, the warning from Russian President Vladimir Putin. I believe it's the final warning that he's going to give to the collective West, specifically to the US and the UK. And we're heading into very dangerous period, a dangerous 2 months, because my fear and my sense of things is that the U.S. and the UK, the Biden White House and Keir Starmer administration, they're not going to listen to the Russian president, even though I believe the Pentagon is getting very worried about the situation. So maybe we begin with the new weapon, the new missile, and we can take it from there.
Indeed. Can I just first of all say that I think we are in a very dangerous period. I don't think we're heading into it. I think that when the missile strikes took place against Russia over the course of this week, a massive line was crossed. I agree with you completely that this is the final warning. And I think people who pretend otherwise or still think that the Russians are bluffing are deluding themselves. Now, I think that this missile strike on Dnipro, on the gigantic Yuzhmash factory in Dnipro, has, however, come as a serious shock. I've been reading the British and American media. I've been looking also at the British military media, also people whom I know are connected to the military. For example, a man called Ramadi, who writes for the Daily Telegraph. He's at King's College, which is a college in London, which is well connected to the military. He's been an extreme hardliner. He now finally admits that we're in a very, very risky situation, that we are poking the bear, as he put it, and that there is now a real possibility that things could get out of control. That is a complete change of language from people like him, I should say. Now, the reason that's happened is twofold. Firstly, it's what Putin has said, and we will come to that in a moment. But let's first, as you said, look at the missile that was used. So this is the Oreshnik. It means hazel, apparently, in Russian. Very typical Russian name for a weapon system. They like to choose rather ordinary words for their weapons rather than very dramatic ones. So that one occasionally gets the odd exception. This is a very powerful missile indeed. It has intermediate range. So that means that it can hit any target anywhere in Europe, including, by the way, the UK. It is not designed to strike at the continental United States, though I am going to suggest that we need to think about the implications of that, and that might change as well. Now, the thing to say about it is that it is apparently a development of an earlier missile called the Rubesh. The Rubesh was a shorter range, lighter missile that the Russians have had under development for some time. Development stopped a couple of years ago. It had apparently been restarted with the missile being reconfigured to carry more hypersonic warheads and to be more hypersonic itself. So it apparently can achieve speeds within the Earth's atmosphere of 12 times the speed of sound. And it carries 6 warheads. Now, these warheads are what are called MAVD warheads, which is to say that they can independently maneuver, and they do so achieving hypersonic speeds. And each warhead within itself carries 3 further rounds. So you can see that, we're talking about one missile, and this missile is able to hit 18 targets. And obviously, it can hit 18 targets with each target being hit with a nuclear device, because these warheads are designed to carry nuclear devices, or alternatively, and there is some uncertainty about this, they can either carry explosive devices, or they can do their damage through the sheer force, the kinetic energy of a strike caused by a missile that is flying at 12 times the speed of sound. And it seems that the kinetic energy is simply tremendous. Any one of these missiles would do colossal damage. Any one of these warheads, I should say, would do colossal damage to any object that it struck, even if it wasn't carrying an explosive device at all. So this is an extraordinarily powerful system. It can hit any target in Europe, and as Putin reminded everybody, there is no air defense system in existence or planned or being designed that is capable of intercepting it. It means that the Russians can attack any target they wish right across Europe, military headquarters, governmental buildings, industrial facilities, shipyards, aircraft carriers, warships, and they can reach these targets. And because of the incredible speed at which these missiles move, the Ukrainians say that it took this missile 15 minutes to reach its target in Dnipro from the city of Astrakhan on the Caspian Sea. And apparently there are others who think that the time was even shorter than that. Basically, there is no time to redeploy personnel or equipment or whatever the target is to protect the target once this missile is heading in that direction. So this is an extraordinarily powerful system, one that the Russians have not commented about previously, one which the Americans had only sketchy information about. Putin has said that it is now being placed in serial production. This was, if you like, a flight test of the prototype system. It has been a completely successful test, and we must now look forward to seeing more and more of these missiles deployed.
And Russia has a whole lot of other missiles that can do just as much damage, if not more, including reaching the United States.
Absolutely, and I wanted to say something.
And real quick before you you comment, from what I understand, the Orezhnik did not have a payload. Is that?
That's right. Well, that's
what analysts say. But anyway, yeah,
that's what analysts say. But as I said, the sheer kinetic force of one of these missiles, one of these warheads, simply hitting a target is so tremendous that it arguably doesn't need an explosion, explosives inside it. The damage done, even without explosives, is simply tremendous. Now, I just wanted to make a quick observation about whether or not this missile might eventually be able to target the United States itself. Over the last couple of years, the Russians have been speaking about developing a next generation submarine, nuclear submarine, called the Laika. Laika is a breed of Russian dog. And they have spoken about this submarine being equipped with a missile with these kind of warheads, a hypersonic ballistic missile with these sort of warheads. Now, if a submarine like that is developed, then of course it could operate near the coast of the United States and it could strike targets in the United States. And for all I know, that is the plan. And as you rightly say, the Russians have many other kinds of missiles. They have intercontinental ballistic missiles, which is what some people initially thought this was. They have lots of other missiles as well.
Yeah, the avant-garde and all of these missiles. Yeah. Okay, so Putin has given his final warning. What do you think comes next? What is if you had to take a guess, what do you think the Biden White House and the UK are going to do now? We have a word that NATO is going to have an emergency meeting on the 26th to discuss this new weapon. And you have Ukraine, as well as, unfortunately, it's amazing. It's incredible that this is happening. But you have a lot of leaders, especially in Europe, who continue to insist that Putin is bluffing. He's bluffing. Don't believe him. We need to continue to strike at Russia with ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles. A lot of leaders, a lot of media in the UK, in the US, in Poland, in the Baltics are urging the Biden White House and Keir Starmer to press on and to continue to attack Russia. Orban, once again, is the only leader, Orban and Fico, Vucic as well, actually, but I'm looking at the European Union, Vucic being outside the European Union. They have all said Putin is not bluffing. He's not bluffing, they've said. They're on record. What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, I think the first thing to do is just look at what Putin actually said. He said, we have this capability. We are absolutely prepared to use it. If missile strikes against our territory continues, then we reserve the right to conduct strikes ourselves against the countries which are involved in carrying out these strikes against us. So he's basically signaling that at some point the Russians will launch a strike against Britain and, of course, France as well, if France continues to conduct strikes like this against Russia. And by the way, if that happens, the political effect is incalculable. British and French publics have not been prepared for this. I don't think anybody outside the military or the political class has really discuss this in any serious way. If a thing like this happens, even if only conventional warheads are used, which I presume initially they would be, it would come as a simply enormous shock to the public, certainly in Britain and also in France. Now, I don't think Putin is bluffing. I've seen absolutely no evidence that he's bluffing. There's, as you correctly say, Orban has said that he's not bluffing. Fico has said that he is not bluffing. Now, remember, Hungary and Slovakia are both members of NATO. So they will attend that meeting, that NATO Council meeting, on the 26th of November. And they will be speaking out there. I think they will not be alone, by the way. I think Italy has already signalled that it is very, very worried and unhappy about the course events are taking. And I think various other governments are worried also as well. Germany, of course, is in a state of crisis. Chancellor Scholz has just seen off a political challenge from his defense minister, Boris Pistorius. He's still chancellor. He's still opposing delivery of Taurus missiles. He knows perfectly well the German public opinion opposes any escalation. The British government, I'm afraid, is, I think, obsessed with escalation. They have an economic crisis on their hands. I get the sense, however, that the British military are in shock about what has happened. They did not expect that the Russians would demonstrate a capability like this. I suspect that the British military, which does have some very, very intelligent people amongst it, are now telling Starmer, look, this has gone as far as it can. We have to back off. The strike with the Storm Shadows apparently was not a success. We've been given details about it by Putin. It didn't hit the command post that it was intended to hit. I've no doubt that the Russians are telling the truth about that. So we are throwing away expensive Storm Shadows and ATACMS missiles to achieve nothing of significance. We are simply provoking the Russians into an escalation which our missiles cannot match. The capability we have, unless we go nuclear, is feeble by comparison to what the Russians have just shown that they can do against us. Now, I hope Starmer is listening. I'm not confident that he is. We know previously that the Foreign Office has advised against this action. And that, of course, brings us back to the United States, because it is in the United States that the key decisions are going to be made. Now, again, there's been a complete silence right up to the moment of the launch of the ATACMS missiles from the Pentagon. That silence basically continues. We've had some extremely evasive statements from Sabrina Singh. She's the Pentagon spokesman. She's just commenting, giving basically factual statements about what has happened. I think that there is growing alarm in the Pentagon about this whole situation. I think they're urgently, my guess is that they're urgently advising the president to slow down. The trouble is that I don't sense that the president himself understands the incredibly high stakes game he's playing. I don't think the president has much grasp of anything anymore. And the people around him, well, any situation where Jake Sullivan, his national security advisor, appears the relative moderate, tells us that the people around the president are hardliners of various types, because Sullivan is hardly a moderate in any real or genuine sense. So I hope that these voices of restraint are heeded. At the NATO summit meeting, Fico and Orban will have an opportunity to state their views. Erdogan, by the way, will be there as well, and he also is clearly very alarmed about the situation. But I have to say, one mustn't assume, one certainly shouldn't think that the prospect of further escalation from the Western side has gone away.
Well, the
NATO is set to hold an emergency meeting on Tuesday after Russia tested a new intermediate-range ballistic missile on Ukraine. The new missiles have the ability to carry nuclear-capable weapons. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the launch was in response to Ukraine's recent use of long-range missiles provided by the U.S. inside his country. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata joins us now from the Pentagon. So, Charlie, what does the fact that Russia is testing these intermediate missiles signal to Ukraine, the U.S., and its allies? Does it change the trajectory of this war?
It does, Lindsay. It does. For the people that I've spoken to, while some U.S. officials say Russia likely only possesses a handful of these experimental missiles, I've been told they pose a unique threat. So they're capable of reaching 3,000 miles. They carry a multiple payload system. It's called a multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles. This is important because as the missile descends, those multiple warheads can be released at different speeds and different directions, potentially spread over 1,000 miles. So that, combined with its lofted trajectory, challenges even the most advanced of Ukraine's air defense systems. So the missile that we saw at Dnipro focused on one area, and we've seen some of the videos. So it came overhead and then unleashed 6 warheads down to a concentrated area. It's unlike anything that they've seen on the battlefields of Ukraine. And yes, the term that they've used here, they're not worried, but they're concerned.
Could Russia essentially decimate Ukraine with a handful of these missiles they have left?
Well, Lindsay, you know, not decimate, but just for instance, right? So we've seen, and I've been there, when Russia has unleashed a number of, S-300 missiles, which are anti-aircraft missiles. They get plenty of reach. They get the Shahed Iranian drones that can come in. But say Lviv, right? Lviv is way far west, very close to the Polish border. This comes in at a different trajectory than a cruise missile, which is easier to intercept, and the missile defense systems are in place to do that. But if Russia were to launch a number of these missiles at the same time, Ukraine would really struggle to take them down. And this, I think what we saw at Dnipro, we're only talking about maybe 750 miles from Russia. They could throw anything at Dnipro, and they have. I think that was messaging to say, this is what we've got, and this is what we can do with it.
How is Ukraine expected to respond?
Well, mostly they'll be asking for more defense systems. They're going to need, Patriot defense systems, and they're going to need real defense. There's concern. For the first time, really, I believe, since the war began, they had to shut down their parliament. Just yesterday, the United States shut down its embassy. We had a warning that a new missile was going to be tested days before it happened, and we reported that. So that just shows you that in a place where air raid sirens are pretty much a fact of daily life, some people don't even rush to the shelters. They are now because of the unpredictability of what this weapon poses.
South Korea says Russia supplied air defense systems to North Korea in exchange for troops to support the Kremlin's war with Ukraine. What more are we learning about this?
Yeah, so this came from intelligence and South Korean Foreign Ministry, who essentially underlining what they said was going to happen, certainly with the United States and others were worried about. North Korea sent 11,000 troops to Russia. They immediately started saying, well, wait a minute, what do they get in return? And this seems to be an indication. So they have anti-aircraft missiles that are being supplied to North Korea. Not that big a deal, but in terms of the technology, what they're more capable of, North Korea's got their own air defense systems. This is new because it's Russian. They're also trading technology. According to the same statement, the Russians are providing North Korea with oil, and that is against sanctions. Not that it much matters with those two countries, but that's that sort of cooperation. This is a two-way street. 11,000 North Korean troops, when you consider tremendous losses that Russia is suffering, is really just a drop in the ocean. You have to ask yourself what North Korea is getting in exchange for that.
Ukraine is hoping for concrete and meaningful outcomes at next week's emergency NATO meeting. What is Kyiv asking for? Are they going to be asking for more of those defense systems?
Lindsay, that is, I just read that statement, and that's where the statement ends. But it's a refrain that we've heard time and time again. They want concrete productivity out of these meetings. They can't have platitudes. NATO is concerned. Poland especially is concerned about the development of this new weapon. Russia has got plenty of weapons that can reach NATO countries. It's what this weapon represents. And I also I keep drilling down about this. You know, the United States just had a $275 million aid package promised to Ukraine. There's something like $5 billion in aid on the table right now. It's called a surge that the Biden administration said that they want to get to Ukraine. And the clock is ticking. You know, the Ukrainians know it. The Russians know it. We're headed to a new administration. Nobody's entirely sure whether that support for Ukraine will continue past January 20th. So there's very much a hurry-up offense, but particularly with the development of these new weapons. You know, the United States has allowed these ATACMS, longer-range weapons, to be used on Russian soil. That's a major development, and it's one of the reasons that President Putin said he's unleashed this new weapon directly because of that and Britain's Storm Shadow. So we have seen a huge escalation in the past week or so. Ukraine's been out of the headlines for a long time. We have teams there once again. This is front-page news. We're talking about it now. This is going to accelerate and increase as we get closer to January.